Let me ask you something. When was the last time you woke up genuinely rested? Not just technically conscious, not I was in bed for 7 hours, so I guess I slept, but actually deeply, profoundly rested. The kind of rested where you open your eyes and your first thought isn't about how tired you are or how long until you can nap, but where you feel alert and capable and ready for the day. If you're over 50 and you had to think for a moment before answering that question, you're not alone, not even close. According to the National Sleep Foundation, nearly half of all adults over 50 report having trouble sleeping on a regular basis. Half. And that number climbs as we get older. By the time people reach their mid-60s, somewhere between 52 and 64% of them report consistently poor sleep quality. We're talking about a sleep crisis hiding in plain sight, one that most people chalk up to stress, or getting older, or just the way things are now. But here's what nobody is telling you clearly enough. The way things are now is not inevitable. Poor sleep after 50 is not simply your destiny. It is a biological puzzle. And like most biological puzzles, once you understand the pieces, you can start putting them back together. Today, we are going to do exactly that. We're going to pull back the curtain on the real science of why sleep changes so dramatically after 50. We're going to walk through the specific biological mechanisms, the hormones, the brain circuits, the architecture of sleep itself, that shift as we age. And then, grounded in that understanding, we're going to look at what actually works. Evidence-based strategies, lifestyle choices, and some powerful connections between the way you eat and the way you sleep that most people have never considered. By the time we're done, you'll understand your sleep in a way that most physicians don't take the time to explain. And you'll have a clear, actionable path forward starting tonight. Let's get into it. Part 1. The architecture of sleep. What it is and why it matters. Before we can understand what changes after 50, we need to understand what sleep actually is, because most people think of sleep as a single thing. You close your eyes, time passes, you open them again. But the reality is far more interesting and far more intricate than that. Sleep is not a uniform state. It is a precisely choreographed sequence of distinct biological events, cycling through your body and brain every 90 minutes or so throughout the night. Scientists call this sequence sleep architecture, and understanding it is fundamental to understanding why poor sleep is so damaging, and why certain types of sleep loss hit people over 50 particularly hard. When you first fall asleep, you enter what's called non-rapid eye movement sleep, or NREM sleep. This itself has 3 distinct stages, each with a different character. Stage 1 is the lightest stage, the threshold between wakefulness and sleep, where you might occasionally jerk awake with the sensation of falling. It's brief, accounting for roughly 5% of your total sleep time. Then comes stage 2, a considerably deeper and more substantive form of light sleep that takes up roughly 45% of your night. During stage 2, your heart rate slows, your body temperature drops, and your brain produces bursts of activity known as sleep spindles. Pulses of neural firing that researchers believe are critical for memory consolidation and learning. You don't know any of this is happening. You're just lying there, seemingly doing nothing. But your brain is extraordinarily busy. And then you go deeper still, into stage 3, slow wave sleep, or what scientists sometimes call deep sleep or delta sleep. This is the truly restorative territory. In stage 3, your brain waves slow to long, rolling waves of electrical activity so powerful and Synchronized, they look almost tidal on an EEG readout. Your heart rate is at its lowest. Your blood pressure is at its lowest. Your body is flooding itself with growth hormone, repairing damaged tissue, rebuilding muscle, consolidating the immune system. Your glial cells, the support cells of the brain, are contracting, opening up channels for cerebrospinal fluid to flush through the interstitial space between neurons, clearing out the metabolic waste products that accumulated while you were awake. This waste clearance system, discovered only in 2013 by researchers at the University of Rochester and now known as the glymphatic system, is one of the most remarkable recent discoveries in all of neuroscience. The glymphatic system is essentially your brain's own sewage and sanitation department. During slow-wave sleep, research suggests that the interstitial space between neurons may expand significantly, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to move through and carry away soluble proteins and metabolic byproducts, including, critically, amyloid beta and tau proteins, the exact same proteins whose accumulation in the brain is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. In mouse models, research published in Science has shown that glymphatic clearance occurs predominantly during sleep. And in a landmark human study published in Nature Communications in early 2026, researchers found that glymphatic clearance during normal sleep increased morning plasma levels of Alzheimer's biomarkers compared to sleep deprivation, suggesting the brain was actively clearing these waste products overnight. This is not a minor detail. This is your brain actively protecting itself from neurodegeneration while you sleep. Every night, assuming you are actually getting enough quality deep sleep to allow it to happen. After a period of deep sleep, something remarkable occurs. You transition back toward lighter sleep, and then, roughly 90 minutes after you first fell asleep, you enter rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep. Named for the characteristic darting movements of the eyes beneath closed lids, REM sleep is neurologically the most dramatic stage of the sleep cycle. Your brain becomes nearly as active as it is during wakefulness. Your limbs are temporarily paralyzed, a biological safety mechanism preventing you from acting out your dreams. Your breathing becomes irregular. Your heart rate varies. And this is where the most vivid narrative dreams occur. But REM sleep is far more than a dream delivery system. Research has established that REM sleep is essential for emotional processing and regulation. It's the stage during which the brain essentially runs its emotional records through a sort of decontextualized replay, separating the emotional charge from the memory content and allowing us to process difficult experiences without being re-traumatized by them. It is also critical for creativity, pattern recognition, and complex cognitive problem solving. The connections your brain makes during REM sleep, the associations it forms between seemingly unrelated pieces of information, underlie much of what we call insight. 4 to 6 of these 90-minute cycles happen in a healthy night of sleep. And critically, the composition of each cycle changes as the night progresses. The first half of the night is dominated by slow-wave deep sleep, the physically restorative territory. The second half of the night shifts toward longer and longer REM periods. This means that if you go to bed at 11 and wake up at 4, you might technically have gotten 5 hours, but you will have slept heavily through the first 2 cycles and missed most of your REM sleep entirely. And if you go to bed at midnight and wake up at 5, the same thing happens in reverse. The architecture of healthy sleep requires not just enough hours, but the right hours, distributed throughout the night. A meta-analysis of 65 studies covering more than 3,500 healthy subjects found that total sleep time decreases linearly with age at a rate of roughly 10 minutes per decade. That might not sound dramatic, but when it compounds across other changes in sleep architecture, it tells a sobering story. Up to the age of 60, the percentage of slow-wave deep sleep decreases by roughly 2% per decade. REM sleep diminishes as well, though more subtly. The net effect is a steady increase in lighter sleep stages. You spend more time in stage 1 and stage 2, and less time in the genuinely restorative deep and REM territory. And this is before we even begin talking about the specific biological changes that drive these shifts after 50. Because aging doesn't just passively erode your sleep, it actively disrupts the systems that create it. Part 2. The biological clock breaks down. At the center of your sleep system is something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, a tiny cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons nestled in the hypothalamus, just above where the optic nerves cross. This is your master biological clock. It governs your circadian rhythm, the approximately 24-hour cycle of physiological changes that coordinates virtually every system in your body with the cycle of day and night. The SCN receives light information directly from specialized cells in your retina called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells are particularly sensitive to short wavelength blue light, the kind that predominates in natural daylight. When blue light hits them in the morning, they signal the SCN to suppress melatonin, ramp up cortisol, raise body temperature, and begin the long sequence of physiological events that constitute your waking state. As evening approaches and light fades, these signals reverse. Melatonin begins to rise, cortisol falls, body temperature starts dropping, and the body begins preparing for sleep. This is the circadian rhythm at its most fundamental, a daily oscillation of alertness and sleepiness, activity and rest, wakefulness and sleep, all orchestrated by a clockwork mechanism in the hypothalamus responding to light. After 50, this clock starts to show its age, and the changes are specific and well documented. First, there is the phenomenon researchers call phase advance. As people age, typically beginning around 60 to 65, though the shift begins more subtly even earlier, the circadian rhythm gradually shifts to an earlier timing. People begin to feel sleepy earlier in the evening and wake earlier in the morning. This is not a preference change or a lifestyle choice. It is a genuine biological shift in the timing of the internal clock. Research has documented that all the major circadian markers, core body temperature rhythm, melatonin secretion, cortisol secretion, shift roughly 1 to 2 hours earlier in older adults compared to younger adults. The practical consequences of this are often bewildering to the people experiencing them. You used to stay up comfortably until 11. Now you're fighting to keep your eyes open at 8:30, and by 9, you're falling asleep in front of the television. Then you wake up at 4 in the morning, wide awake and unable to get back to sleep, having gotten perhaps 6 hours. And you spend the day exhausted, wondering what's wrong with you, dragging through the afternoon, desperate for an early bedtime. And the cycle repeats. What's happening is that your internal clock is genuinely running 2 hours ahead of where it used to be. And if you fight it, if you force yourself to stay up until your old bedtime out of stubbornness or social obligation, you're essentially giving yourself chronic social jet lag. You're forcing your body to be awake when its biology is screaming for sleep, and then sleeping at a time when your circadian system is already starting to ramp back up towards wakefulness. Second, the circadian rhythm itself becomes less robust. This is perhaps the more insidious change. It's not just that the clock shifts, it's that the amplitude of the daily rhythm diminishes. In young adults, the difference between peak alertness and peak sleepiness is pronounced and sharp. The peaks are high, the valleys are deep, and there is a clear, reliable signal driving the body toward sleep at night and toward wakefulness in the morning. In older adults, this amplitude dampens. The peaks aren't as high, the valleys aren't as deep, the signal gets murkier. Daytime alertness is less robust, nighttime sleepiness arrives less forcefully, and the entire system becomes less reliably anchored to the 24-hour cycle. This is why so many people over 50 experience a pattern of feeling simultaneously exhausted and unable to sleep. The body's drive towards sleep is genuine, but the circadian architecture that normally delivers deep, consolidated sleep has lost some of its precision. Sleep becomes fragmentary. You fall asleep, but the machinery keeping you asleep is less effective, and you wake up more easily and more often. Part of what drives this deterioration is a decline in the function of the SCN itself. Research has documented age-related neuronal loss in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The very cells that generate the circadian signal begin to decline in number and activity. The retinal ganglion cells that feed light information to the SCN also change with age. The lenses of the eyes yellow and thicken, the pupils tend to become smaller, and the overall amount of light reaching the retina decreases. Since the entire circadian system runs on light, this reduced light input weakens the signal that keeps the clock synchronized. A study published in the journal Springer Nature found that age-related neuronal loss in the SCN reduced melatonin production, and the eye changes that reduce the ability of light to reach retinal ganglion cells all contribute together to a desynchronization of circadian rhythms in older adults. These changes are compounding and interactive. Each one makes the others worse, and together they create what researchers describe as a circadian rhythm that is weaker, less responsive to external cues, and more easily destabilized. And then there is melatonin. Part 3. The melatonin story. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, and while this is an oversimplification, it doesn't so much cause sleep as signal the biological timing of darkness and prepare the body for sleep. It is an extraordinarily important molecule in the sleep architecture story. Melatonin is produced in the pineal gland, a tiny structure deep in the brain that René Descartes once believed was the seat of the soul. It begins rising 2 hours before your habitual bedtime, reaches its peak in the middle of the night, and then gradually declines through the early morning hours, falling to baseline just around the time you normally wake up. This nightly melatonin surge is one of the most reliable biological signals in the human body, a chemical dusk that tells every cell in your body that night has come, and it is time to power down. After 50, this system undergoes a significant decline. The decline in melatonin secretion with age appears to begin as early as the 3rd decade of life, with total melatonin output progressively decreasing. By the time people reach their 50s and 60s, the nightly melatonin peak is substantially lower than it was in youth. Research published in the American Journal of Physiology found that not only do melatonin levels decline with age, the timing of the peak also shifts, moving earlier in the evening in alignment with the broader circadian phase advance. This creates a situation where people may have higher relative melatonin levels when they wake up in the early morning hours, contributing to that characteristic groggy but can't sleep phenomenon. What this means practically is that the chemical signal telling your body to fall and stay asleep has become quieter. The melatonin signal, which in youth arrives like a clear broadcast, now arrives more like a distant station with interference. The body still receives the message, but it receives it less clearly, less forcefully, and with less reliability. It's worth noting something important here. The relationship between melatonin decline and sleep quality in aging is more nuanced than it's sometimes presented. Some research suggests that very healthy older adults may maintain relatively robust melatonin rhythms, and that much of the decline is associated with other aging-related changes rather than aging alone. But for most people navigating the sleep challenges of their 50s and beyond, the melatonin system is a real and meaningful part of the picture. The implications extend beyond just falling asleep, because melatonin is not only a sleep signal, it is also a powerful antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecule with effects throughout the body. It helps regulate body temperature. It modulates immune function. It plays a role in the timing of other hormonal systems. Its decline is part of a broader biological change, and its effects ripple outward in ways that compound the sleep disruption. Part 4. The hormone upheaval. Sleep after 50 doesn't just contend with a weakening circadian clock and declining melatonin. It exists in the middle of a broader hormonal upheaval that has profound and direct effects on sleep quality. For women, the transition through perimenopause and menopause represents perhaps the most dramatic single disruption to sleep in adult life. More than 40% of perimenopausal women report significant sleep problems. Studies of postmenopausal women find that somewhere between 52 and 64% report consistently poor sleep quality. These numbers are not coincidental. They reflect a direct physiological relationship between falling hormones and disintegrating sleep. Estrogen plays multiple roles in sleep regulation. It helps maintain body temperature during the night by supporting the normal nocturnal drop in core temperature that healthy sleep requires. It supports the metabolism of serotonin, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine, all neurotransmitters that influence sleep architecture. Research has shown that adequate estrogen levels reduce the time it takes to fall asleep, reduce the number of awakenings after sleep onset, and increase total sleep time. When estrogen falls, all of these benefits begin to reverse. But perhaps the most dramatically sleep-disrupting consequence of falling estrogen is the emergence of vasomotor symptoms, hot flashes and night sweats. More than 80% of women experience hot flashes during the menopausal transition. When they occur at night, they can be catastrophic for sleep. Research from Johns Hopkins has established something interesting and somewhat counterintuitive here. Although most women believe the heat sensation wakes them up, the brain changes that trigger the hot flash actually begin before the felt sensation of heat. Women are often waking up because of the neurological event itself, not because of the temperature. This means that even women who don't report feeling disturbed by hot flashes may still be experiencing sleep disruptions from the underlying brain activity. Progesterone, often described as the calming hormone, acts on the same brain receptors as benzodiazepines, the GABA. A receptors that regulate neural inhibition and sedation. Progesterone promotes slow-wave deep sleep, exerts an anxiolytic, anti-anxiety effect, and functions as a mild respiratory stimulant that helps maintain open airways during sleep. When progesterone falls in perimenopause and menopause, all of these protective effects decline simultaneously. Women lose their hormonal sleep support just when they need it most. There is also a meaningful relationship between falling hormone levels and the development of obstructive sleep apnea in menopausal women. Estrogen and progesterone are collectively protective against the airway collapse that characterizes sleep apnea. Postmenopausal women are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop obstructive sleep apnea compared to premenopausal women, according to research from Johns Hopkins Medicine. This is not incidental. The loss of hormonal support for airway muscle tone combined with changes in fat distribution that accompany the hormonal transition, makes the menopausal airway fundamentally more vulnerable to collapse during sleep. And sleep apnea, which causes repeated arousals throughout the night as the airway closes and reopens, can devastate the quality of sleep while leaving people completely unaware that it's happening. Many women have their sleep disorders misattributed to menopause, symptoms when in fact they have developed a distinct and treatable condition. For men, the hormonal story is different in character but parallel in consequence. Testosterone levels decline gradually from their peak in the mid-20s, at a rate of roughly 1 to 2% per year, accelerating somewhat after 50. Research has established a bidirectional relationship between testosterone and sleep. Poor sleep reduces testosterone production, and low testosterone disrupts sleep quality. This creates a particularly vicious cycle for men over 50. Testosterone is secreted primarily during sleep, with the highest levels occurring during REM sleep. When sleep quality deteriorates and REM sleep is disrupted or shortened, testosterone production falls. And as testosterone falls, the quality of sleep tends to deteriorate further. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, also changes its rhythm with age. Research from Penn State's Sleep and Circadian Neurobiology laboratories has shown that older adults tend to have a 1-hour advance in the timing of cortisol secretion, along with a reduced amplitude of the cortisol rhythm. In youth, cortisol follows a sharp daily curve, low through the night, rising sharply in the early morning to drive wakefulness, then declining through the day. When this rhythm shifts earlier and its amplitude dampens, it contributes to both the early morning awakening pattern common in older adults and the reduced daytime alertness that follows poor nighttime sleep. All of these hormonal changes, falling estrogen, falling progesterone, declining testosterone, altered cortisol, interact with each other and with the circadian system. They don't operate in isolation. They compound one another, creating a cascading set of disruptions that, from the inside, simply feels like I can't sleep as well as I used to. Part 5. What you're actually losing and why it matters. Let's be specific about what deteriorating sleep after 50 is actually costing you, because this isn't about feeling a bit tired. The science here is serious, and you deserve to have it explained plainly. The most alarming connection, and the one that has driven the most research in recent years, is the relationship between poor sleep and dementia. A landmark study led by researchers at INSERM and University College London, published in Nature Communications in 2021, tracked nearly 8,000 people beginning at age 50. Participants were assessed on multiple occasions over 31 years. The study found that consistently sleeping 6 hours or less per night at ages 50, 60, and 70 was associated with a 30% increase in dementia risk compared to those sleeping 7 hours. Let that sink in. A pattern of moderately short sleep, 6 hours, not 4, not 5, but 6, beginning in midlife, was associated with a 30% higher likelihood of developing dementia decades later. A complementary study from Harvard Medical School examined more than 2,800 individuals aged 65 and older, and found that those sleeping fewer than 5 hours per night were twice as likely to develop dementia and twice as likely to die compared to those sleeping 6 to 8 hours. And a study published in JAMA Neurology from researchers at Monash University found that each 1% reduction in slow-wave deep sleep per year for people over 60 was associated with a 27% increased risk of dementia. Not total sleep time, the proportion of specifically restorative deep sleep. The mechanism connecting poor sleep to dementia likely runs through the glymphatic system we discussed earlier. Amyloid beta and tau, the proteins that accumulate in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease, are produced continuously as byproducts of normal neuronal activity. During wakefulness, these proteins build up in the interstitial space between neurons. During sleep, the glymphatic system clears them. Research using positron emission tomography has demonstrated that even a single night of sleep deprivation in healthy young people increased amyloid beta burden in the brain. If this clearance is chronically impaired, night after night, year after year, the proteins accumulate. The brain begins to resemble a city whose sanitation workers are perpetually on strike. Research published in Science from the laboratory of Maiken Nedergaard, who first described the glymphatic system, concluded in a review published in 2020 that glymphatic failure may represent a final common pathway to dementia, not just Alzheimer's, but vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, and Parkinson's disease as well. The glymphatic system degrades with age, and this degradation both reflects and contributes to the broader deterioration of sleep architecture. It is one of the most compelling arguments for treating sleep as a biological imperative rather than a lifestyle preference. Beyond dementia, the cardiovascular consequences of poor sleep are well established. Inadequate or disrupted sleep activates the sympathetic nervous system, raising both blood pressure and heart rate. It increases systemic inflammation, drives insulin resistance, and disrupts the normal hormonal regulation of appetite and metabolism. Research from Harvard Health has documented that sleeping 5 to 6 hours per day doubles the risk of being diagnosed with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes compared to sleeping 7 to 8 hours. Research on sleep apnea, which is dramatically underdiagnosed in people over 50, has found that people with moderate to severe sleep apnea have 3 times the risk of stroke compared to people without it. In 2022, the American Heart Association added sleep duration to its Life's Essential 8, the key metrics for cardiovascular health. Sleep is now officially recognized as being as important to heart health as blood pressure, cholesterol, and blood sugar. There is also the immune system. Deep sleep is when the immune system consolidates its resources and produces cytokines, signaling molecules that coordinate immune responses. Chronic sleep restriction weakens immune function, increases susceptibility to infection, and is associated with elevated markers of systemic inflammation. For people over 50, whose immune systems are already navigating age-related changes, the immunological costs of poor sleep compound other vulnerabilities. And then there is the mental health dimension, which is both a consequence and a driver of poor sleep. Research following roughly 1,000 adults aged 21 to 30 found that people with a history of insomnia were 4 times as likely to develop major depression within 3 years compared to normal sleepers. For many people over 50 who are also navigating significant life transitions, career changes, children leaving home, the illness or death of parents and peers, the interaction between sleep disruption and emotional health can become deeply entangled. Poor sleep degrades emotional resilience, impairs the brain's ability to regulate emotional responses, and creates a vulnerability to both anxiety and depression that in turn makes sleep worse. The point here is not to frighten you. It is to be honest with you about what's at stake. Your sleep is not a luxury. It is not a nicety. It is one of the most fundamental acts of biological self-maintenance you perform. And the science is unambiguous. Consistently poor sleep after 50 measurably accelerates the biological aging of your brain, your heart, your immune system, and your metabolism, which makes what comes next The solutions, not just interesting, but urgent. Part 6. The Sleep Hygiene Foundation. Before we get to the more specific and targeted interventions, let's establish the foundation. There are certain sleep hygiene principles that are so well supported by evidence, so fundamental to healthy sleep architecture, that no conversation about improving sleep after 50 is complete without them. You may have heard some of these before. If so, consider this a reminder about why they matter, grounded in the biology we've been discussing. Consistency is the single most important lifestyle factor in sleep quality. Your circadian system runs on the 24-hour clock, and it synchronizes itself through regularity. Going to bed and waking at the same time every day, yes, including weekends, is not a rigid lifestyle rule for its own sake. It is the practice of feeding your circadian rhythm the consistent timing signals it needs to maintain its amplitude and precision. Every time you dramatically shift your sleep-wake schedule, sleeping in 2 hours on Saturday, staying up 3 hours late on a Friday, you are giving your circadian clock conflicting signals. For a young person with a robust circadian rhythm, the system recovers relatively quickly. For someone over 50 whose circadian amplitude is already diminished and whose SCN is working with fewer neurons and less light input, schedule inconsistency is particularly costly. The second foundational element is light. Because the circadian system is fundamentally light-driven, managing your light environment is one of the most direct interventions available to you. Morning bright light exposure, ideally outdoors, but bright indoor light works, is the most powerful Zeitgeber, external time cue, available to the human circadian system. Getting 10 to 30 minutes of bright light in the eyes within an hour of waking tells the SCN exactly when morning is, anchors the circadian phase, and sets the timing of the melatonin rise that evening. For people over 50, who average only about 1 hour of daylight exposure per day, according to research, deliberate morning light exposure is genuinely therapeutic. The reduced light transmission through aging eyes makes adequate light exposure even more important. You need more light input to achieve the same circadian signal strength. Conversely, managing light in the evening is equally important. As discussed, light, particularly blue spectrum light, suppresses melatonin secretion. Evening exposure to the bright screens of phones, tablets, and televisions sends the SCN a signal that it is still daytime and delays the melatonin rise that should be preparing your body for sleep. Dimming your environment in the 2 hours before bed, using warm amber lighting rather than bright white or blue spectrum light, and reducing screen exposure in the evening are not optional sleep hacks. They are direct interventions in the melatonin system. If your already diminished melatonin production is being further suppressed by a screen until 10:30 at night, you're essentially asking your body to fall asleep, while the circadian system is receiving daytime signals, room. Temperature is another factor with direct physiological grounding. The initiation of sleep requires a drop in core body temperature. The body needs to offload heat to the environment as part of the process of entering and maintaining sleep. The optimal bedroom temperature for sleep is generally considered to be between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. Rooms that are too warm interfere with this cooling process and fragment sleep. For women navigating menopausal hot flashes, a cooler room environment is particularly important, as it expands the buffer between body temperature and ambient temperature, reducing the likelihood that a hot flash will cross the threshold into wakefulness. Exercise deserves special mention as a sleep intervention that is surprisingly powerful and significantly underutilized. Research consistently demonstrates that regular, moderate-intensity aerobic exercise improves sleep duration, reduces the time it takes to fall asleep, and specifically increases slow-wave deep sleep, the very stage that declines most with age. A meta-analysis of exercise and sleep research found significant improvements in sleep quality, efficiency, and slow-wave sleep from regular physical activity. The timing matters. Exercise performed in the morning or early afternoon tends to support better sleep. Late evening exercise, particularly vigorous exercise within 2 hours of bedtime, can delay sleep onset by activating the sympathetic nervous system and raising core body temperature. For people over 50, moderate intensity resistance training offers a particularly compelling combination of benefits. It supports testosterone maintenance, improves body composition, strengthens the cardiovascular system, and through its effects on muscle tissue and metabolism, may specifically support deeper, more restorative sleep. Alcohol is worth addressing directly because there is a widespread and persistent misconception that alcohol helps sleep. Alcohol does reduce the time it takes to fall asleep. It functions as a sedative in the initial stages. But the way alcohol affects sleep architecture is deeply counterproductive. As the body metabolizes alcohol through the night, it creates a neurological rebound effect that fragments sleep in the second half of the night, exactly when REM sleep should be increasing. Alcohol dramatically suppresses REM sleep and increases the likelihood of waking in the early morning hours. For someone already experiencing age-related reductions in REM sleep, adding alcohol to the mix is compounding a deficit. Caffeine, which most people understand intellectually but dramatically underestimate practically, has a half-life of approximately 5 to 7 hours in healthy adults. And this half-life typically extends with age as liver metabolism slows. A cup of coffee at 2 in the afternoon means that significant quantities of caffeine remain in the system at 9 or 10 at night, actively blocking the adenosine receptors in the brain that promote sleep pressure and sleepiness. Adenosine is the molecule that accumulates in the brain during wakefulness, creating increasing pressure for sleep. It is essentially the biochemical measure of how long you've been awake and how much you need sleep. Caffeine works by blocking the receptors that sense adenosine. The adenosine is still there, still building, but the signal isn't being received. And then when the caffeine finally clears and the adenosine surges into the receptors all at once, sleep tends to be of poor quality and leaves you still exhausted in the morning. The bedroom environment itself is a legitimate sleep tool. The bedroom should be genuinely dark. Blackout curtains are worth every cent, quiet and cool. The associations between your bed and sleep are real and neurologically grounded in what psychologists call stimulus control. Your nervous system learns through repetition and association, and it learns what your bed means. If you spend significant time in bed working on a laptop, watching television, scrolling your phone, or lying awake worrying, the bed begins to signal wakefulness rather than sleep. If you reserve the bed exclusively for sleep, the associative cue becomes more powerful. This is not soft psychology. It is basic conditioned learning with real neurological underpinnings. Part 7. The gold standard. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Here is something that most people don't know, and that most physicians don't tell their patients clearly enough. The most effective treatment for chronic insomnia is not a sleeping pill. It is a structured, evidence-based behavioral intervention called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBT-I. A 2015 meta-analysis of 20 randomized controlled trials of CBT-I for people with chronic insomnia found average reductions of 19 minutes in the time it took to fall asleep and 26 minutes in time spent awake after waking during the night. Total sleep time improved by 8 minutes, and sleep efficiency, the proportion of time in bed actually spent sleeping, improved by 10%. These are clinically meaningful improvements, achieved without medication, without side effects, and with benefits that continue long after the treatment ends. In fact, CBT-I produces results equivalent to sleep medication in the short term, and dramatically better results in the long term. Sleep medications tend to lose effectiveness over time, carry risks of dependency and tolerance, and do nothing to address the underlying causes of the sleep problem. CBT-I, on the other hand, addresses the behavioral and psychological patterns that maintain insomnia and teaches the person to work with their own sleep system rather than trying to override it pharmacologically. The cognitive component of CBT-I addresses the thoughts, beliefs, and attitudes about sleep that perpetuate insomnia. People with chronic insomnia often develop a set of deeply unhelpful but firmly held beliefs that they need exactly 8 hours of sleep or they can't function, that they will be destroyed by a bad night's sleep, that lying in bed and resting is almost as good as sleeping, even if they're awake. The cognitive work helps identify these beliefs, examine the evidence for and against them, and replace them with more accurate and less anxiety-generating frameworks. Because anxiety about sleep is itself one of the most powerful drivers of insomnia, the fear of not sleeping creates the physiological arousal that prevents sleeping. Shifting the cognitive relationship to sleep can be genuinely transformative. The behavioral component of CBT-I includes practices like sleep restriction therapy, counterintuitively, temporarily limiting time in bed to match actual sleep time, which builds powerful sleep pressure and improves sleep consolidation, and stimulus control, which reinforces the association between bed and sleep. It also includes relaxation techniques, progressive muscle relaxation, slow, deep breathing, guided imagery, all of which activate the parasympathetic nervous system and reduce the physiological arousal that makes sleep difficult. CBT-I is available through sleep psychologists, some primary care physicians, and increasingly through digital applications. For people over 50 struggling with chronic insomnia, it is the intervention most strongly recommended by the evidence, more strongly recommended than any supplement, prescription, or device. Part 8. Supplements. What the research actually says. The supplement industry around sleep is enormous and, like most enormous supplement industries, considerably larger than the quality of evidence supporting it. Let's be honest about what is well supported, what is emerging, and what is largely noise. Melatonin is the most widely used sleep supplement, and it is also one of the most frequently misused. The evidence for melatonin is specific and context-dependent. It is well supported for helping with circadian rhythm disruptions, jet lag, shift work, and the circadian phase advance of aging. Taking a small amount of melatonin, and this is important, the research supports doses in the range of 0.5 to 3 milligrams, not the 5 or 10 milligram megadoses sold in most drugstores. Taken 30 to 60 minutes before the desired bedtime can help shift the circadian phase and reinforce the sleep signal. For people over 50 experiencing the phase advance discussed earlier, low-dose melatonin taken at an appropriate time can be genuinely helpful. However, melatonin is not a sleeping pill. It does not sedate you. It signals timing. If your circadian clock is reasonably well entrained, but you simply struggle to fall or stay asleep because of anxiety, pain, or other causes, melatonin is unlikely to solve that problem. two clinical practice guidelines, one from 2017 and one from 2019, recommended against using melatonin for treating chronic insomnia specifically as a primary intervention. It is a circadian signal, not a sedative. Magnesium is emerging as a genuinely promising sleep supplement with a reasonable mechanistic story. Magnesium participates in over 300 biochemical reactions in the body, including the regulation of the GABA system, the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter system, and the modulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which controls the stress response. Magnesium deficiency is remarkably common, particularly in older adults, where dietary intake often falls short and absorption decreases. Research published in BMC Complementary Medicine found initial evidence suggesting magnesium supplementation may improve various sleep parameters in older adults. A more recent randomized placebo-controlled trial found that magnesium bisglycinate, a highly bioavailable form, significantly improved scores on the Insomnia Severity Index compared to placebo. The Cleveland Clinic generally recommends a dose around 200 milligrams nightly for sleep purposes, taken roughly 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Magnesium's sleep-promoting mechanism likely involves both its direct effects on GABA receptors, calming neural excitability, and its role in supporting melatonin production. Older adults who are magnesium deficient may find that correcting this deficiency meaningfully improves their baseline sleep quality in ways that go beyond what any pharmaceutical intervention can achieve. L-theanine, an amino acid found naturally in green tea, has a solid, if modest, evidence base for supporting sleep quality. L-theanine promotes relaxation without sedation by increasing alpha brainwave activity, the same type of calm, focused brainwave pattern associated with meditation. A 2019 randomized controlled trial published in Nutrients found that L-theanine supplementation supported better sleep satisfaction and reduced stress-related symptoms in adults with mild anxiety. For people whose sleep difficulty is driven by racing thoughts, a restless mind, or anxiety at bedtime, L-theanine addresses that specific pathway. Valerian root has been used traditionally as a sleep aid for centuries and has a reasonable amount of clinical research supporting improvements in sleep quality and sleep latency, likely through its effects on the GABA and serotonin systems. The evidence is stronger for some preparations than others, and individual responses vary considerably. It is generally well tolerated and is worth considering for people looking for an herbal option. What is worth being cautious about is the category of prescription sleep medications, particularly the sedative hypnotic class, including benzodiazepines and non-benzodiazepine hypnotics like zolpidem. While these can provide short-term relief for acute insomnia, research has documented a more than twofold increased risk of dementia in people with long-term insomnia who use hypnotics, regardless of whether they use the benzodiazepine or non-benzodiazepine type. For people over 50 who already face an elevated baseline dementia risk from sleep disruption itself, adding a treatment that may further elevate that risk is a serious concern. These medications suppress slow-wave deep sleep, the very restorative sleep most desperately needed. And their cognitive effects in older adults can be significant. This is a conversation to have honestly with a physician, not a blanket prohibition, but it is a risk that deserves to be clearly understood. Part 9. The Eating Window and Your Sleep. The Fasting Connection. Here is where we bring in a dimension of the sleep conversation that most people have never encountered, and one that connects directly to the approach to health that this channel is built around. The timing of when you eat does not only affect your metabolism, it directly affects the quality of your sleep. And the mechanism is one of the most elegant pieces of systems biology in the human body. Your circadian rhythm is not controlled only by the suprachiasmatic nucleus and its light input. There is a parallel network of what researchers call peripheral circadian clocks, molecular timekeeping mechanisms operating in nearly every organ and tissue in the body. Your liver, your gut, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your fat tissue. All of them contain their own circadian oscillators, running on the same approximately 24-hour cycle as the master clock in the hypothalamus. And while the SCN synchronizes its peripheral clocks primarily through light and neural signals, peripheral clocks, particularly in the digestive system, are also powerfully synchronized by the timing of food intake. Food is a Zeitgeber. It is a time cue. When you eat tells your peripheral clocks when in the day it is, and if the timing of food signals conflicts with the timing of light signals. If you're eating a large meal at 10 at night, telling your liver that it's daytime, while your brain is trying to tell the body that it's nighttime, you create circadian misalignment. The central and peripheral clocks fall out of sync with each other. The amplitude of the circadian rhythm diminishes and sleep quality suffers. Intermittent fasting, and specifically time-restricted eating, appears to exert meaningful benefits on sleep quality partly through this circadian mechanism. When you confine your eating to a consistent window during the daylight hours, you strengthen the synchronization between central and peripheral circadian clocks. Research from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies has shown that time-restricted feeding reinforces circadian gene clock expression, coordinates feeding fasting cycles with the light-dark cycle, and improves the robustness of the overall circadian system. One study found that participants following time-restricted eating protocols reported improved sleep quality at night and elevated alertness during the day. Research published in Cell Metabolism has demonstrated that early time-restricted eating, consuming all food earlier in the day, is particularly powerful for circadian alignment and metabolic health. There are several specific mechanisms through which intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating may support sleep quality. First, by stopping food intake well before bed, you allow core body temperature to drop more smoothly. Digestion is metabolically active. It raises core temperature, which is the opposite of what needs to happen for sleep initiation. Eating a large meal close to bedtime keeps the digestive system working, keeps core temperature elevated, and delays the physiological cooling that sleep onset requires. Second, the fasting period itself triggers a shift in metabolic state that has direct implications for brain function during sleep. When carbohydrate intake is reduced and the fasting window extends overnight, the liver begins producing ketone bodies from fatty acids. These ketone bodies are not only an alternative fuel source for the brain, they are bioactive molecules with direct effects on neural function. Research has documented that ketone bodies, particularly beta-hydroxybutyrate, influence adenosine signaling in the brain. The same adenosine system we discussed earlier, which drives sleep pressure. Ketones may support the gradual buildup of adenosine that creates genuine physiological sleep drive. There is also emerging evidence that ketone bodies influence slow-wave activity during deep sleep, potentially enhancing the restorative depth of non-REM sleep. Third, the research on the glymphatic system and intermittent fasting shows a particularly fascinating connection. A study published in PMC found that intermittent fasting appears to increase the polarization of aquaporin 4 water channels along paravenous astrocytic end feet, the exact molecular architecture through which the glymphatic system clears waste from the brain. Intermittent fasting, through this mechanism, may directly enhance the brain's ability to perform its overnight cleanup. This is a remarkable finding. The same dietary practice that improves metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, and body composition also appears to upregulate the very system that clears Alzheimer's proteins from the brain during sleep. On the ketogenic side of the equation, a dietary approach that many viewers here are already familiar with, the sleep research is emerging and genuinely promising. A scoping review published in the Journal of Sleep Research in 2024, examining 20 studies on ketogenic dietary therapies and sleep, found several consistent themes. Improvement in overall sleep quality, reduction in difficulty falling asleep and nighttime awakenings, improvement in daytime sleepiness, and in several studies, an increase in REM sleep. A study of 324 women following a very low-calorie ketogenic diet for 31 days, published in the Journal of Translational Medicine, found significant improvements across all measurements of sleep quality after the intervention. There is also specific mechanistic research showing that ketogenic diets promote adenosine activity in the brain, supporting the natural sleep drive system, and modulate the molecular pathways that regulate circadian clock gene expression. Research published in Current Opinion in Endocrinology, Diabetes and Obesity by neuroscientists studying the therapeutic properties of ketogenic diets concluded that many molecular pathways activated during ketogenic states are known to modulate sleep-wake cycles, circadian rhythms, and sleep stages, and that enhancement of slow-wave sleep and rejuvenation of circadian programming may be synergistic with or causally involved in the broader benefits of ketogenic dietary approaches. It's worth being clear here. The research on dietary interventions and sleep is younger and less definitive than the research on, say, CBT-I. There are meaningful variations in how different people respond, and there are some caveats. The transition into ketosis can temporarily disrupt sleep as the metabolic shift occurs, and the early stages of a ketogenic diet may involve some sleep disturbance before the benefits emerge. But the mechanistic picture, the connections between metabolic state, circadian synchronization, adenosine signaling, ketone body production, and glymphatic function, is scientifically coherent and increasingly supported by clinical observation. These are not miracle claims. They are converging lines of evidence pointing toward the same conclusion. The way you eat and when you eat is directly connected to how well you sleep. If you are already practicing intermittent fasting or a ketogenic approach, you may already be experiencing some of these benefits without fully understanding why your sleep has improved. And if you haven't yet connected these dots, this may be one of the most compelling reasons to consider them. Part 10. Targeted strategies for the over 50 sleeper. Let's bring this all together into a concrete, actionable framework specifically designed for the biology of sleep after 50. This isn't a generic sleep hygiene handout. This is a targeted response to the specific mechanisms we've been discussing. The first priority is circadian anchoring. Given what we know about phase advance, diminished circadian amplitude, and reduced light input through aging eyes, the most impactful single daily habit you can build is consistent, deliberate morning light exposure. Get outside within an hour of waking, ideally before 9 o'clock, for at least 15 to 30 minutes. This doesn't require exercise. A slow walk or simply sitting outside works. If weather or circumstances prevent outdoor light, a bright light therapy lamp, delivering 10,000 lux at about 12 to 18 inches from the face for 20 minutes, provides an adequate stimulus. This practice, done consistently, directly feeds the input your SCN is receiving less of and helps maintain circadian phase and amplitude. Pair this with consistent sleep and wake times. Set a wake time and honor it regardless of what happened the night before. Do not try to catch up on sleep by sleeping late on weekends. This shifts your circadian phase in the wrong direction and makes the coming week worse. The consistency of the wake time is more important than the bedtime, because the wake time combined with morning light is the primary anchor for the circadian clock. For the hormonal disruptions, particularly for women navigating the menopausal transition, the most evidence-supported conversation is the one with a qualified physician about hormone therapy. The research on hormone therapy and sleep is nuanced and individual, but the general principle is clear. The hormonal mechanisms disrupting sleep in the menopausal transition are real and addressable. Beyond hormone therapy, managing the sleep environment for temperature regulation, cool bedroom, moisture-wicking bedclothes, bedside fan, directly addresses the thermal disruption of hot flashes in a way that no supplement can replicate. For the timing of your eating window, aim to close the kitchen at least 3 hours before your target bedtime, and ideally closer to 4 to 5 hours. Eating a large meal close to bedtime raises core temperature, activates the digestive system, and creates circadian misalignment between your central clock and your peripheral gut clocks. Ending your eating window earlier aligns peripheral and central clocks, allows core temperature to drop smoothly, and extends the overnight metabolic shift toward fat oxidation and ketogenesis that appears to support deeper sleep. If you are practicing intermittent fasting, consider aligning your eating window with daylight hours as much as practical. Earlier is better from a circadian standpoint, with research from Cell Metabolism suggesting that eating patterns aligned with morning and early afternoon produce the strongest circadian gene expression and the greatest cardiometabolic benefits. A window that runs from roughly 9 or 10 in the morning to 5 or 6 in the evening is what the circadian biology favors, though practical constraints mean that many people find a noon to 7 or noon to 8 window more realistic. Whatever window you choose, consistency of timing, eating at roughly the same times each day, is as important as the length of the window, because the circadian peripheral clocks synchronize not just to when eating starts, but to the regularity of the pattern. For sleep initiation and the racing mind that so many people over 50 describe as their primary sleep obstacle, the most evidence-supported approaches are CBT-I techniques combined with specific physiological interventions. Spend the 90 minutes before bed in a deliberately wind-down mode. Dim lights, warm bath or shower. The subsequent drop in skin temperature as you dry off actually helps initiate the core temperature drop needed for sleep onset. Quiet activities, no screens. Practice slow, diaphragmatic breathing. Extending the exhale to roughly twice the length of the inhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system and directly suppresses the physiological arousal that keeps you awake. Research shows that the vagal brake on heart rate activated by slow exhalation is one of the most reliable triggers of the relaxation response in the human nervous system. For supplementation, if you are going to add anything, start with magnesium in a highly bioavailable form. Magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate, around 200 milligrams taken 30 to 60 minutes before bed. Magnesium deficiency is common in older adults and directly affects the GABA system. If circadian timing is your particular challenge, add low-dose melatonin between 0.5 and 1 milligram, taken about 30 to 45 minutes before your desired bedtime. Avoid the high-dose melatonin supplements sold commercially, which far exceed what the circadian system needs and can paradoxically create grogginess. For people who are experiencing genuinely chronic, severe insomnia, Difficulty falling or staying asleep 3 or more nights per week for 3 months or more? The most important step is to pursue professional evaluation. There are legitimate, treatable underlying causes of chronic insomnia in this age group that deserve attention. Undiagnosed sleep apnea, which is dramatically underdiagnosed, particularly in women. Restless leg syndrome, depression or anxiety, and thyroid dysfunction, among others. A visit to a sleep specialist and possibly an overnight sleep study are not excessive responses to chronic insomnia. They are appropriate medical evaluation. And finally, on the matter of sleep apnea, if your partner has told you that you snore, or that you stop breathing during sleep, or if you wake up with headaches, feel unrefreshed despite adequate time in bed, or experience excessive daytime sleepiness, take this seriously. Sleep apnea is not just a snoring problem. It is a condition in which the oxygen supply to the brain and body is repeatedly interrupted throughout the night, creating a cascade of physiological harm that includes cardiovascular stress, metabolic disruption, impaired glymphatic function, and accelerated cognitive decline. It is also highly treatable. Ignoring it because it seems like a minor inconvenience is one of the most consequential mistakes a person over 50 can make with their long-term health. Part 11, the long game, sleep as investment. Let's close with the perspective that makes all of this worth the effort. Every night of good sleep is an investment. It is an investment in the metabolic machinery that keeps you lean and vital. It is an investment in the immune system that keeps you resilient. It is an investment in the emotional regulation that keeps you connected and present with the people you love. And it is an investment in the brain, in the nightly clearance of the proteins that, if allowed to accumulate over years and decades, can rob you of your memory, your identity, and your independence. We have made enormous strides in understanding what sleep is and what happens when we consistently fail to get enough of it. The picture is sobering, but it is also clarifying, because once you understand the specific mechanisms, you have specific targets. You know that morning light protects your circadian clock. You know that the timing of your eating window directly affects the synchronization of your peripheral clocks. You know that deep sleep is doing essential maintenance on your brain. You know that the anxiety you feel about not sleeping's itself making sleep harder, and that there are evidence-based tools to interrupt that cycle. The question of why you can't sleep the way you used to is answerable. The biological shifts are real. The melatonin is quieter. The circadian clock is running a bit fast and a bit faint. The hormones have changed. The sleep architecture has shifted toward lighter, more fragmented territory. None of this happened because of a personal failing. It happened because you are a biological organism navigating the genuine physiological changes of midlife and beyond. But the question of what you can do about it is also answerable. And the answer is more empowering than most people realize, because many of the most effective interventions are lifestyle-based. They are available to you tonight and every night, without a prescription. Keep your sleep and wake times consistent. Get your morning light. Wind down the lights in the evening. Close the kitchen 3 to 4 hours before bed. Move your body regularly. Learn the breathing techniques that tell your nervous system it is safe to rest. If you are not already exploring intermittent fasting or a low-carbohydrate, metabolically healthy approach to eating, consider the sleep benefits alongside the metabolic ones. They are connected through the same underlying biology. Sleep is not a passive state. It is an active, profoundly important biological process that requires your participation, your attention, and your respect. The 50-year-old who decides to take their sleep seriously is making one of the most consequential health investments available to them. Not because it will restore every feature of youthful sleep. The biology has genuinely changed, and some of those changes are permanent, but because the gap between where your sleep is and where it could be, with the right understanding and the right practices, is almost always larger than people expect. Your brain wants to clean itself tonight. Your body wants to repair itself. Your memory wants to consolidate. Your immune system wants to strengthen. Your emotional processing wants to run its nightly cycle. All of that is trying to happen. The work is in creating the conditions to let it. If this video helped you understand your sleep in a way it wasn't understood before, if it gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening and what you can actually do about it, please take a moment and share it with someone you know who's in the same boat. Because the person waking up at 3 in the morning wondering what's wrong with them deserves this information. They deserve to know that it's biology, that it's understandable, and that there are real tools available to them. If you want to go deeper, if you want to understand the full picture of how intermittent fasting and metabolic health intersect with sleep, cognition, and aging, my books on intermittent fasting and the ketogenic approach cover much of this territory in detail. The links are in the description below, and please hit subscribe if you haven't already. We cover this territory every week on the Optimal Life Project, evidence-based health optimization for adults who want to understand the science, not just follow the rules. There's a lot more coming. Until next time, sleep well. It matters more than you think.